The agenda for a global governance system at work in our world today is largely involved with mass mind control. This mind control is concerned with the loss of personal power, and in fact works to further three main conditions of loss. The first is amnesia, or loss of memory. Second is abulia, which is loss of will. And the third condition is apathy, which is loss of interest in events that are vital to one's overall health and well-being. Modern man, despite his own intellectual vanity, exhibits all three characteristics to an ever-increasing degree, as these psychological conditions are necessary for the occult elite's implementation of a one-world control system. Among the many techniques of mind control utilized is the subversive use of sacred symbolism. On a daily basis, the average person is inundated with a barrage of occult symbolic archetypes. These symbols appear everywhere, from the vivid imagery of advertising to the swift-moving pictures of the silver screen. They are encoded in architecture, can be found on our money, appear in the emblems of the police and military, are integrated into most all corporate logos, and much more. Let's explore the possible motivations for the subversive use of symbolism in our world today, and how such symbolism functions as a technology of psychological warfare, a warfare waged on humanity by an occult-obsessed elite. Symbols are a language, not merely for the conscious mind, but for the entirety of one's being, a method of communication that speaks to the human subconscious. The very word logo, for example, or logos, derives from the Greek word lego and literally means I say. Symbols indeed talk to us, but instead of speaking aloud, they are a language of visual representation. It should be said that the overall concept of symbolism in general could technically be applied to sounds and gestures as well. But for the purpose of this presentation, I am referring specifically to esoteric symbolism and how such is portrayed in a visual, pictorial context. Esoteric symbolism is most commonly described as the mysterious secret imagery of shadowy organizations. But rather than perceiving such as secret, it is more accurate to think of these symbols as being veiled. For esoteric symbols are transmitters of information and influence that move beyond the scope of conscious cognition and in fact penetrate into the deepest recesses of one's inner mindscape, a proverbial Trojan horse of psychic influence. The average person is of course largely illiterate of occult symbolic archetypes, and still, as many mystic philosophers and even modern psychologists have described, these symbols can have quite an influential effect on an unwitting mind. Used subversively, this symbolism becomes an insidious cryptic language, specifically designed to stimulate the lower human appetites, encourage our more destructive and compulsive urges, and activate a host of other inharmonious drives that conflict with an individual's higher conscious nature. Constant exposure to this subliminal persuasion reinforces their effect, and ultimately arrests the spiritual development within individuals, and in turn stifles the evolution of spirit on a species-wide level as well. Archetypal transference is an idea that points to the existence of race memories that are embedded within each of us, past ancestral connections with certain symbolic archetypes that were perhaps once sacred to us, the subject of our worship, or even representative of past oppressive forces of which we lived in fear. And these symbols speak to, or hold a kind of energetic resonance with our unconscious mind. Thus, we are subconsciously drawn to them, which particularly makes sense in an advertising context, a reasoning for why certain products and services employ specific symbolic motifs that are subconscious resonators with a desired feeling or state of mind. This could be leveraged to make those goods or services more appealing. The very act of relating our once sacred archetypes with the bland artificiality of modern products, or the unnatural motivations of psychopathic corporations, serves to undermine that which we traditionally upheld as spiritually important, and widens the schism between modern man and his true esoteric roots. Symbols that once communicated deep wisdom and profound spiritual truth are now associated with mindless consumerism and abysmal authoritarian corruption. Man is being disconnected from his past, and symbolism is being used to further his ancestral amnesia. The ruling class possess knowledge of humanity's true history, knowledge that is sequestered and or perverted to hide certain narratives and uphold others. And it is quite feasible that they could evoke deep-seated ancestral emotions within us and manipulate those emotions with specific symbolic archetypes of historic significance. By choosing symbolic motifs that were once associated with the domineering practices of a past powerful authority, the elite could employ the same basic archetypes to bolster their own authoritarian projections. Symbols do not necessarily require a historic context to resonate with the subconscious. In the ages-old practice of dark sorcery, or its modern incarnation, often called chaos magic, sigils are utilized. A sigil is a pictorial representation of a magician's desired outcome, a symbol that has been mystically charged with the willful intent of the creator of that symbol. It is possible that specific intentions could be used by the occult elite to willfully charge a symbol with a specific resonance, one that energetically is a type of fear inducer, an intimidating authority, or even a demonic or malevolent force of which a sigil collectively represented, whereby the inner power of the symbol viewer is compromised due to their own subconscious resonance with it. And this could be done to uphold and reinforce the influence of external authority, that dominating power force that is emblematic of the occult ruling class, in a manufactured abulia that manifests collectively as the control system we see today. This would be a type of visual incantation or spell that is cast pictorially to reinforce the matrix of the mainstream paradigm, having a possible hypnotic effect on the minds of the unaware masses and further binding them to the consensus construct. In these ways, both archetypal transference and black magic sorcery via the occult practice of sigil making aids, or is at least believed by the occult elite to aid, in the science of building paradigms. The ever-increasing pervasive presence of symbols in our world, and how they overwhelmingly pollute the mainstream, shows that symbols are, at the very least, a technology in a wide-ranging arsenal of technologies that are being utilized in the art of mass mind control. It has additionally been suggested that this symbolism is an ego-driven facet of megalomania, whereby the elite fulfill a predatory need to proclaim their dominance, both to each other and the subconscious mindscapes of the masses, in a kind of intimidation tactic via the symbolic branding of everything they do, a method of psychological warfare that can be seen as a type of mockery of their victims. This predatory urge to mock the masses, whom the elite view as inferior, can easily be illustrated, especially when one understands that many symbolic presentations often secretly represent the exact opposite of the consensus perception of a particular symbol's meaning. An excellent example of this can be seen in the symbolic arrangement of the hammer and sickle on the flag of the former Soviet Union. It is commonly understood that the hammer and sickle represent the tools of the working class, a union of urban industry and rural agriculture that together form the idea of a unified working class utopia, a system whereby, in theory, everyone provides for and is accommodated equally by the galvanized societal whole. But understanding the occult meaning behind this image, a meaning that long predates the Soviet Union, provides a completely different picture. The sickle is the tool of Saturn, or Kronos, the demiurge, whereby his sickle was used to sever and divide the unity of earth and heaven, in a detaching of the earthly realm from the realm of the divine. The demiurge Saturn is the architect of the material world, but importantly, only after its separation from the divine. Saturn rules, much as the elite aspire, over the vibratory matter of the material world. The occult elite's obsession with erecting the colossal edifices of civilization, their practicing of stonemasonry and the principles of its philosophy, and their obsession for molding and controlling all of the material world, is carried out in the spirit of adoration for and emulation of the grand architect Saturn. The hammer is the obliterator of matter, the final act of chaotic destruction to then usher in their new order. It is the instrument that deals the death blow to the last remnants of divine will within human beings, in a process by which man devolves or descends further into a post-human world, one seized in total by a tyrannical ruling class, the indefinite overseers of a newly ordered material realm. And so notice the official meaning of the flag is that of a unified utopia, whereas the occult meaning is that of a divided dystopia, the exact opposite of meanings. Considered in this light, it is difficult to see such as anything other than a macabre mockery of the symbol-illiterate masses, and a tactic of psychological warfare. In considering the vast amounts of manufactured amnesia, abulia, and apathy within the general populace, a mass hypnosis and conditioning is definitely at work in our world, and symbols have indeed played some part in this. But their true purpose extends beyond the realm of directed psychological warfare, and in fact enters the realm of manufactured consent. A consent harvested by the deliberate revealing of the occult elite's method. Often overlooked by the alternative media, revelation of the method is an occult philosophical concept by which the elite deliberately reveal their presence and workings in the world today in order to insulate themselves from the consequences of universal law. To understand revelation of the method, and how it is in part fulfilled via subversive symbolism, one must first understand how a knowledge differential between the elite and the masses leads to a vast power differential. The elite are able to tailor the framework of the mainstream paradigm so as to adequately control the minds of the masses by sequestering esoteric knowledge regarding the workings of human consciousness, particularly how human consciousness is interrelated with the natural laws of the universe. Such information is known to the elite, and they operate accordingly, while at the same time strategically encouraging limited, untruthful, and disempowering information for public consumption. This knowledge gap allows them to utilize the laws of nature for their own advantage. They know how natural law operates, that it is immutable and always in effect. And so it is nature's law that every holistically intelligent being possesses freedom of will, the freedom to choose what to do or what not to do with their behavior. However, every such being is also subject to the consequences of those behaviors. Natural law can thus be seen as the spiritual laws of consequence that govern the behavior of holistically intelligent beings. Infringing upon the free will of another being without their implicit consent incurs negative universal consequences that no being in creation can avoid. The consequences of such an infringement may not immediately take effect or be readily apparent, especially from the perspective of our third density reality. But nevertheless, these consequences are an inevitability. This presents a major problem for the elite, and this spiritual law is most likely perceived by them as a frustrating limitation upon their psychopathic urges. They have, however, devised techniques to dampen the effect. To insulate themselves from the negative consequence incurred from infringing upon free will, the elite employ a variety of tactics, the most effective being that they simply convince others to infringe upon free will for them. Notice how, when a war is waged, it isn't the ruling class that maim or kill. The soldiers on the battlefield commit the violence for them. Look up at the sky and you'll more than likely see it crisscrossed with toxic chemtrails. But it isn't the elite that are piloting those planes, or manning the controls of those drones. Again, it is the man or woman that is obeying a chain of command, who is disavowing their own inherent self-authority, only to take orders from a supposed external authority of a higher status. Silent, resistance-free participation in a system that is in diametric opposition to life and freedom is considered by the elite to be consent for that system. Thus, from their perspective, free will is not directly being violated. It is those who willingly participate with the belief in a justified external authority and act on those beliefs by committing violence against their fellow man who are in direct violation of natural law. Through revelation of the method, the dark occultists wish to insulate themselves further from the consequences they would otherwise incur by directly infringing upon the free will of the masses. They plan to bring about a new world order and rule completely over the physical realm. But to do so, and establish such indefinitely, without eventual retribution, they must harvest the implicit consent of the people. By utilizing symbols, as well as other means to reveal their method, whether that be overtly by consciously alerting the people, or more subtly by bombarding the subconscious mindscapes of the people with a constant stream of symbolic influence, they are slowly gaining the people's implicit consent. At a deep level, regardless of how asleep some may be, most know in their core that something isn't right. Their conscious mind may not totally be aware, but their subconscious mind, emotional intellect, and inner divinity in particular, is aware. And this is because it has been esoterically revealed to them via the barrage of subversive symbolism they receive in all aspects of modern life. The deliberate revealing of the method through symbolism is aimed not so much at the conscious mind, but at the underlying core of a person's being, day in and day out, in every facet of their mainstream existence. Yet the masses still participate, and they participate most oftenly with their thoughts and emotions in constant conflict with one another. Internally, the average person feels the inherent wrongness, the inherent artificiality of mainstream living. Yet consciously, their programmed mind has been conditioned to accept and submit, to believe what they are told is true, instead of generating their own thoughts and acting from a place of truth. Abulia, loss of will, is the result of this. When one's thoughts and emotions are constantly in conflict with one another, they consent by inaction and non-objection. They refuse to act on their own behalf and instead uphold the ideas and principles of others. Only when one's thoughts and emotions work in conjunction with one another can they take true action. In fact, this touches directly on another concept sequestered by the elite called the trivium. The trivium is a Latin word meaning the three ways or the three roads leading to the truth. It is a method of critical thinking. It has been described in many ways, one way being the harmonious interplay of thoughts, emotions, and actions. Through such things as educational programming, psychological operations, mass rituals, and propaganda, as well as subversive symbolism and other types of social engineering, the conflict experienced between the average person's thoughts and emotions make it impossible to take unified, harmonious action. And such inaction in the face of tyranny is considered by the elite to be as good as consent. Let's take a look at a specific example of symbolism in this context, and how it is used to reveal the New World Order agenda. With this example in particular, we will see that the symbolic transmission isn't merely subliminal, but speaks to the conscious mind as well. For in this case, the symbolism chosen utilizes a commonly known Christian motif, and was intended to be seen by those who could have easily been familiar with it. The Council on Foreign Relations is an organization started in the early 20th century to bring America into the realm of world government. It is a globalist think tank, the American arm of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and a major tool in the elite's arsenal for bringing about a one-world government. It is comprised basically of power elites in international finance, business, and government, who wield their power regardless of political office holders, including the president, who are mere frontmen for members comprising the council, as it directly supplies cabinet and sub-cabinet personnel to Washington, including over the years 21 secretaries of defense, 19 secretaries of the Treasury, 17 secretaries of state, and 15 CIA directors. The CFR's logo quite blatantly announces its true purpose, but before we analyze it, I first want to establish the Council's motivations with a couple of quotes. From former CFR member Admiral Chester Ward, he says, "The purpose of the Council on Foreign Relations is promoting the disarmament of U.S. sovereignty and national independence, and submergence into an all-powerful one-world government." So clearly he is expressing CFR aspirations for a new world order. This next quote is from a journal that Time magazine calls the most influential journal in print, which is Foreign Affairs, the Council's official journal. And in a 1922 article, Philip Kerr further illustrates the CFR's goals. It reads, "Obviously there is going to be no peace or prosperity for mankind, so long as it remains divided into 50 or 60 independent states. The real problem today is that of world government." Based on these quotes and many more, not to mention the CFR's actions, which speak louder than words, reveal the Council's obvious motivations for a one-world control system. Now let's examine the CFR logo and see how it reveals the method of the Council and its intentions for global domination. A white horse rears up and over a banner that reads VBIQVE. Let's assume there is a deliberate message being delivered here in order to fulfill the concept of revelation of the method and adhere to natural law. If this is so, one would expect to see symbolism consistent with global conquest. Let's take a look at White Horse mythology and its symbolic meaning. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse is perhaps one of the most well-known symbolic motifs that features the white horse. From the mainstream Wikipedia article on the subject, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are described in the last book of the New Testament of the Bible, called the Book of Revelation. By the way, it is interesting we are talking about revelation of the method and examining a concept from the book of the Bible with the same name. Revelation chapter 6, verse 1 through 8 tells of a book or scroll in God's right hand that is sealed with 7 seals. Returning briefly to the concept of sigils, it's interesting that sigil derives from the Latin word sigillum, meaning seal. Perhaps the book in God's hand contains 7 sigils. As the scripture tells, the Lamb of God, or Lion of Judah, Jesus Christ, opens the first 4 of the 7 seals, which summons 4 beings that ride out on white, red, black, and pale horses. Verses 1 through 2 describe the first being to ride out. They say, "I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he went out conquering, and to conquer." The white horse is representative of conquest. Let's examine the scroll. On it is written the letters VBIQVE, which is a Latin word found on ancient Roman coins, which means everywhere. Its English form is UBIQUE, ubic, the root word in English for ubiquitous, which means everywhere at the same time, or omnipresence. So to translate the logo, we have conquest everywhere at the same time, or in other words, to conquer the world. They have constructed a logo that backs up their goal for global governance very clearly, out in the open, communicating their agenda and revealing their method in order to insulate themselves from the consequences of natural law. And that is just one example, but modern life is saturated with these symbols, including in one of the most common places of all, on the back of the $1 bill, the reverse of the Great Seal, which, like the CFR logo, spells out the global agenda in quite blatant detail. I won't analyze it here, though. There are too many examples of excellent analysis on the subject. Once one is cognizant of these symbols, the extent to which the average person's subconscious is assaulted hundreds, if not thousands of times per day with occult symbolic archetypes is astounding. It is important to realize that this has been an extremely well-planned process. Only after the public has been sufficiently primed, exhibiting adequate enough levels of manufactured amnesia, abulia, and apathy, can revelation of the method in its purest form take place, something we are beginning to see, especially in our modern age of information. Thus far, with the possible exception of the quite blatant CFR logo, we have explored symbolism only in the context of subliminal transmission, that is, scenarios in which the symbol viewer is not fully consciously aware of that symbol's effect on their mind. Revelation of the method in its most fully realized sense is the making manifest of all things hidden. The elite are gradually shifting the divulging of their influence from the subconscious minds of the people and moving such onto the main stage of the consensus paradigm. The beast is slowly emerging from the shadows and announcing its presence to the world in this, the final act of a psychodrama of enormous scale. As modern man basks in the glow of his own artificially inflated ego, thinking he resides at the forefront of human evolution, as constant flattery has led him to believe he is living as the most relatively liberated human being in history, enjoying the technological comforts wrought from ironclad scientism at the zenith of human progress, the opposite is actually taking place. A carefully orchestrated process of human alchemy has long been in effect, one that has sought to transmute a self-empowered, spiritually connected mankind into the soulless drones of a mechanized, strictly material age. A humanity that can directly be shown the iron bars of their own prison cell, and have been transformed to such a fully realized degree that they mistake those bars for the evidence of their own freedom. As the New World Order agenda comes ever closer to fruition, the extent by which the elite's method is self-revealed is becoming ever more blatant. The oppressive authority needed under a global governance framework requires increasingly higher levels of manufactured consent. For if it were to proceed in strict opposition to the greater will of the people, such a system would be built on sandy soil, so to speak, and inevitably doomed to fail. The implementation of a one-world control system has been the goal of the ruling class from the beginning of human civilization itself, and thus the amount of careful planning and dedicated patience that has been devoted to their monumental task boggles the mind. To think they would hastily upset the primary inviolable law of which they are bound by rushing the process is inconceivable. Consent is the key to securing their capstone. Thus, we are seeing revelation of the method being carried out to higher degrees of directness. In the modern age, with the advent of the internet, and the fact that most all human information is now easily accessible to nearly everyone, the next phase of the process has taken effect. Because anyone can educate themselves on matters of esoterica, including occult symbolism, and in fact all aspects of the overarching agenda, the harvesting of consent is in a mode of acceleration. The option now exists to comprehend the methods and motivations behind what is happening in our world, and the pursuit of such comprehension is a personal choice that anyone can willingly make. This is the essence of revealing the method, for it is not as much about making the truth known, as it is about allowing the possibility for the truth to be known. Yet, make no mistake, the elite social engineers will continue to promote untruths, disinformation, and propaganda, and these tools will continue to evolve with the changing popular zeitgeist. But at the same time, all that was previously hidden will be made manifest. Truth will exist alongside the lies, and its attainment will be dependent on the individual's desire to either align their perceptions with the authentic, or continue living their life in an artificial reality of someone else's design. For those individuals that have long broken their consensus trance, they no doubt have encountered countless examples of the elite's self-revelation. As these examples increase, they are becoming easier to spot. The entertainment industry is so fully saturated with occult symbolism, and particularly the constant repetition of MK Ultra imagery, that even the mainstream is beginning to take notice. The so-called Illuminati music industry has become common knowledge, with the infamous single eye and pyramid identifiable to almost everyone. As misguiding and distracting as this particular exposure can be, it still promotes the existence of hidden controllers and insidious agendas. If the elite were interested in remaining totally secret, their use of symbolism would wane, yet its implementation obviously continues to rise. The occult elite indeed want their presence to be known. Perhaps the greatest example of this is the Snowden revelations. The character known as Edward Snowden may himself be a crafted deception, but the information he is bringing to light is serving to incrementally introduce the masses to the fact that they are living in a surveillance state. This is no accident, and certainly no breach of lax security, but is instead another deliberate reveal, and was in fact orchestrated for a variety of reasons. People behave differently when they know they are being watched. They censor their actions, their words, and even their thoughts. They behave with constant mindfulness of external authority. And most importantly, they consent by participating without raising objection or offering resistance. With such apathetic acceptance to such obvious tyranny, these revelations will undoubtedly continue to occur. The sheer boldness already exhibited by the architects of civilization is astounding, as they are so fully confident in their grip on society that they will outwardly announce their presence and aspirations, and remain certain that an entranced humanity will either reject such notions as ridiculous conspiracy, or, if they do happen to accept it, will lack the means, integrity, and willpower to overcome their plight. Esoteric symbolism is indeed a tool for controlling minds and manufacturing consent. However, these symbols can most certainly be reclaimed and used for the upliftment of humanity as well. Once cognizant of the subversion, one can immunize themselves from the negative symbolic influence by willfully refusing to associate these sacred symbols with perversions like artificiality and authority, and instead embrace the true spiritual gnosis that is esoterically encoded within them. Instilled amnesia can be healed by reconnecting with one's true esoteric roots, honoring past ancestors, celebrating cultural tradition, and refusing to let these vastly important ideas and practices be forgotten. The immense spiritual insights and universal wisdom of our ancestors is far too precious and important to lose touch with. Sacred symbols contain the seeds of this knowledge, and by making oneself symbol literate, one can help unlock these truths within themselves. The sequestered knowledge of human consciousness, its interrelation with the movement of the heavens, and the consequential principles of creative will were, after all, stolen from our truly enlightened ancestors, the mystics and sages of the ancient world. Therefore, living as honorable human beings, such knowledge is our birthright to reclaim. The so-called elite's misguided use of this wisdom, and their attempts to reconstitute it for their own advantage, is a perversion of the natural order in itself, and thus will ultimately result in failure. They may have temporarily skirted the consequences of their nefarious behavior by largely avoiding direct infringement upon free will, but their method contains a fatal flaw nonetheless, in that such dishonest, harmful subversion is still an indirect violation of the laws of creation. Although such malevolent sorcery is perhaps not initially consequential in the physical realm, such gross violations of morality must be accounted for in the spiritual realm, in the true reality that envelops and permeates the facade of matter. The predatory class may have accrued vast material resources and enjoyed worldly success, but true wealth is measured in spirit, love, and light. Perhaps the more appropriate emotion to feel then, in regards to the occult elite, is most certainly not fear or even anger, but pity, for their spiritual journey and return to Source has been halted, as they have trapped themselves in the lower realms of consciousness, with no real sign of progress in sight. What's more, their current dominance of the material world is primed to end as well. The wisdom of our ancestors tells us that this age of great forgetting gives way to a future era of light and peace. To usher in such times, however, we must not fall prey to the crude tactics of manufactured consent and mental control waged against us. What we must do is continue to better understand the methods and motivations of evil that operates in this world, and summon the will within us to say no to it, to not give away our consent, but to trust and follow our own moral compass, and to exercise the birthright of every human being on this planet to live, to grow, and to thrive, each as free and unique expressions of the life-giving force within us all.